see if this works. Yeah, so I have a bunch of different ideas for this talk. One of them is going to be what is a game? But I figured that was too easy. So that's just a quick recap of what a game is. The other one I was thinking of was something like how to be a successful indie, but it's really difficult for me to say because I've only released one indie game, and who knows, you can't, it's really hard to separate success from luck sometimes. So make something you love, keep costs low, listen to people, tell people about it, get a bit lucky, and also hang around for Rami's talk, and Julie. Yeah, so anyway, getting rid of all that useful stuff. I was just going to talk a bit about kind of natural systems and natural kind of connections between things in the world, and whether we can approach like a similar kind of sort of sense of connectedness and wonder in games, or whether we can't. No. So yeah, this is just a view of the hedgerows near where I live in Cambridgeshire, and I'm just going to skim through a couple of example things. And this is little tiny plant called hairy bittercress, which grows in little cracks in mud between walls. And just interestingly, it makes these beautiful kind of radial fractal patterns, even though it's growing in the dirt and it's about 5 centimeters across. It's elder, which has these beautiful masses of flowers, has tons of kind of rich associations with folklore, which I'll go into later. This is a little deer that was visiting us in our garden. It's kind of weird to see you see this kind of quadruped moving and wonder what's going on. You just get these strange glimpses of being in a jungle. There's only a few of these, and it goes more in depth soon, don't worry. So yeah, we've got a bunch of these things called red-legged partridges that run around near us. They look like people running for a bus. They're introduced for hunting. And if you think games have trouble with pleasant walks being interrupted by gunshots, then yeah, reality's got you beat. Yeah, there's a lot of gunfire where we live, which is kind of weird. Do you want to go? So there's another little plant here, it's yarrow. This is really an unobtrusive little plant. Again, has all these kind of associations that I'll get into soon. The joke's kind of ruined with this one because I'm not using my laptop, but this is these tiny little almost microscopic insects that float around at harvest time. They like feed on the grains or something, but everything gets covered in them. This one's actually inside my screen. I could point to this screen, but it's not my screen anymore. So it doesn't come up very well. That's like RGB phosphors, and there's a big horrible insect in there. It's through a microscope. Yeah, underlying all the stuff, you've got the kind of chalk bedrock, which was formed in warm chalk seas about 300 million years ago. But now it's just these kind of huge flat industrial fields. That's what it has. Yeah, elsewhere in the country, chalk has been put to good use by kind of mysterious peoples in the past. So you get these strange like figures of horses and giants. So it's kind of there's Sir Abbot's giant in Dorset, which I can recommend visiting. It's pretty amusing. It was built opposite a monastery, so I think it's kind of there's this whole kind of set of stories about did they put it there to kind of mock the monks, or who knows. So near us, there's from that initial photo, there's an Anglo-Saxon earthwork that runs behind our house. And this is actually, originally it's built as a defence to control a particular important trade route through England. But now it's just a strange kind of linear jungle between huge kind of industrialised farmland. So farmland is really, it's totally homogeneous, but there's this strange little kind of crack that you can get into, and it's this looking down this kind of layered jungle and just incredible richness of stuff in there. And this is when I was trying to get through the jungle, but it defeated me.
And snakes.
Snakes. That's true. Yeah, it's something that I've just found discovered recently that's living there. It's this bird that's actually endangered because of changing farming practices. So it's called a northern lapwing. And a couple of weeks ago, Tamsin and I went out, girlfriend is out there, went out to watch the space station pass overhead from the dike, and just had this kind of quite bizarre soundtrack. So that's screen doesn't stick. That's the space station. You have to imagine, firstly, that you can see it, and secondly, that it's kind of moving across the sky like this amazing bright point of light. So yeah, it's a very weird, eldritch kind of soundtrack, which is actually those birds just, I guess, having a good time. So all these things, just looking at, so all these things are either linked by place or by ecology or geology or history, and there's this kind of particular attribute to how you perceive these things. You only ever see these kind of glimpses and kind of subtle views into kind of mysteries. Like the chalk figure there. We don't really know who built that, but you just have to kind of engage in this. I mean, there are obviously theories and there's a certain amount of evidence there, but largely it's about almost like personal storytelling and interpretation, figuring out where these things came from. And then, I'll go into some more of the kind of cultural associations later. That's right. I just have to stick with an ugly border for the rest of the talk. There's this amazing kind of web of things in the world that are all connected, and the more you look, the more you see, and the slower you go, the more you see. And part of this is, another kind of attribute is these kind of cycles of growth and decay and history and rise and fall, and we only ever see a small glimpse of that where we are now. So we can kind of interpret things, or we can kind of look closer into them. And it's a really beautiful kind of poetic example of this, which I also discovered recently. This idea of a crypto forest. So crypto forest means it means two things really, but one of the things it means is a kind of intrusion of nature into the built environment. So on a micro scale, there's kind of radial. Kind of fractal radial plant at the start is just a small example of growing with cracks. And there's an example of something where, again, the more you look, the more you see. And this, even just this picture is this amazing kind of multi-layered tapestry of different things going on. So you have the Georgian kind of Jane Austen era buildings in the background. This is actually Bath, not Cambridgeshire. And then I think there's some fruit trees buried in here. It's part of people's gardens, but it's grown over in this kind of incredible, seething mass of plants, it's just this amazing kind of fractal, infinite depth of detail as you delve into them. And there's a really nice. So that URL there is the blog that I found the term from this blog, and I think they partly invented it. So it just has this nice quote saying the crypto forest is a cultural, not a biological way to classify nature. The recognition of a crypto forest is a visionary act, not a mechanical operation. And that, as that kind of there's this, again, it's like an interaction by perception, like you're reading into all these things, you're kind of picking these things apart, and you can kind of leaf through these plants, and you can discover these crypto forests. I mean, this is completely, almost invisible for anyone else. You have to just spot a gap in a fence, and it looks like people have gone in and out there, and you kind of go in and just find this weird kind of lost world, which it kind of ties into Nicholas's talk, if you were here yesterday, about secrets, and about how if you don't, if things aren't signposted, they have this extra kind of power and beauty, and you feel like you've really discovered something by finding it. And there's another nice little, and as well as crypto forest being a single kind of instance of one of these things, like a single kind of intrusion. It's also, you can think of it as the crypto forest, which is like you're seeing these kind of glimpses, this sort of apocalyptic glimpses of the future where everything's overgrown. So it's a nice, sort of strange time traveling effect. And this is just, how many? Okay. Yeah, so another thing that is like very directly related, and something that I started doing whilst I was working on proteins, is foraging for wild food, wild plants, which again is like this weird mix of perception and research. So you have to kind of figure out what things are. There's loads of poisonous things, so a lot of it's like there's this same kind of satisfaction of not eating a poisonous plant as there is from eating an edible plant. It's like, you didn't get me this time. And it really, I think it kind of changes your perception of how you see these, just kind of massive green here, but as you know more about it, as you kind of dig deeper, you find that it's actually this amazing kind of infinite tapestry of things. So just this is kind of like zooming in closer on that hedgerow. Some hallberries, so that bitter cress again. And all these things, like, as well as being, like, these are edible and next thing's edible, but as well as being kind of functional and that they, you can pick them and eat them and cook them into jam or whatever, they've all got this kind of attached network of folklore and history and cultural usage. So Hawthorne's my Bound, I think, but it has these, it has this kind of beautiful flowers that come out in spring, and it has this association with kind of sex and death, just like waiting for opportunity. So it's this kind of connectedness and kind of picking at these threads, and you suddenly find that everything has all these kind of links going into both other natural things and also cultural things. Go back to the hairy bittercress. So as well as you can eat it and it looks great, you find these like weird little like stars in the ground. It's also kind of historically it's medicinal. It was used in Anglo-Saxons had a thing called the 9 herbs charm, which was like this kind of weird. It's like a cross between a kind of magic spell and a recipe for a kind of weird paste that you like stick on people's wounds after battles. So probably didn't work. Okay, this is back to yarrow. Yarrow has like a really odd, interesting thing. So one of the things is that it's in the same family of plants as wormwood, which is famous for absinthe, but this plant also has that chemical in it. But a kind of stranger association is that the stems were used for one of the traditional forms of I Ching divination in China. So here's an example of the Bagua symbol with the I Ching signs. And that's actually one of the inspirations for Leibniz inventing binary numbers. So there's this weird link between plants and computers. And also you can read this, so all these are the kind of names of types of terrain, I think, like sky, mountain, things. So to me it almost feels like an ancient form of procedural generation as well. Okay, back to Alba. So I did this kind of weird experiment myself with Alba, where because it has this, again, it's like, so if you read about the history of it, it had all these associations. It must have meant so much to people, but we can never really attach that stuff to it now. We kind of understand it with buildings and symbols, like religious symbols, and these things kind of have of how when you see them, you immediately kind of attach all these things to them, but we can't. We very rarely do that with plants, so we kind of have this lost layer of associations that previously, I mean, I'm not saying we should necessarily go back to them, but it's just interesting that there's almost these like orphan associations that don't exist anymore. But I just spent a while just looking at elder trees and just trying to force myself into kind of feeling them as significant, and it's still, I don't know, it's a completely random weird thing, but it still kind of feels weird today to look at them. It's just like I just an exercise in adding, like forcing an association or something. There's an example of kind of growth and decay in ruins, and there's an elder tree growing out of it, which is famous for kind of growing in ruins and breaking apart. So this is kind of jumping continents and jumping subjects. This is a picture of me in front of El Capitan in Yosemite, which is this just incredible, huge granite face. And I guess what I'm getting at here, there's this idea of the sublime, and the word sublime is often, the meaning's been kind of diluted, like people say, oh, that chocolate pudding is sublime. It just means that people just mean, it means very nice. But the original kind of romantic idea of the sublime is this feeling of being confronted by something overwhelming, feeling absolutely dwarfed by something. And this is kind of, it's almost impossible to convey on a small screen or on a game. But it's just, the feeling of standing in front of this kind of huge thing is just feels like being kind of punched in the chest. It's this amazing feeling that is just really hard to kind of convey. But I think we can still try, and I think there's certain abstract ways of doing that, rather than just having a picture of a mountain on the screen. And going back to the I Ching, the Taoists really seem to get this with these kind of beautiful Chinese paintings of mountains, where they're trying to kind of get at this idea of the sublime. And part of I guess the reason that kind of links into all that kind of web of interconnectedness is that whole, those kind of interconnected structures and biological and geological systems that all those things are part of, to me feel like part of the same kind of sublime. So you can see these little glimpses of things, but you know that there's all this kind of web of connection stretching off, this huge kind of metaphysical structure stretching off. And I guess, so this is more of a kind of question than an easy answer. But so here's another great example. It's actually Cologne Cathedral, which again is, you go up to it, you obviously kind of dwarfed, overwhelmed by this thing stretching to the sky, and it has this amazing like filigree fractal detail which extends right up to the top. So I think that combination of detail plus scale is really important. But I just wondering if you can express this kind of thing in games, and both the sense of scale and the sense of process, or sense of kind of richness. And Starseed Pilgrim, this is kind of both an example and an admission that this is only how far I've got in Starseed Pilgrim, which is just the second island. But if you played it, then you kind of look at the screen, and you can see how everything's grown immediately. You know these kind of, this is not too spoilerish if anyone hasn't played it, but you definitely should play. These red things kind of grow by exploding, the purple things, the yellowy things kind of grow by kind of drooping off edges and growing, the yellow things shoot up a little sideways. And to me that almost has a similar feeling to looking at those hedgerow plants, and you kind of understanding why everything is growing where it's growing, and getting this kind of gestalt perception of this kind of organic thing that's grown up. I mean, obviously this is somewhat kind of player created as well, but you can, by looking at it, you can immediately read the processes that have created it. As kind of a silly example, but I don't know if you can read that. Possibly, obviously, or not, this is Dwarf Fortress, which is kind of the canonical, amazingly overcomplicated, infinitely rich game, kind of damage to individual organs is modelled, and monsters can, has this ridiculous rich history that it generates as it creates the world. But I don't know, Dwarf Fortress is a strange one because I always feel like if I'm working on anything like this, it's always Dwarf Fortress is kind of looming over and just there's this huge thing that's, I don't know how long the guy's been developing it, but 5 years. It's almost foolish to approach it, so you kind of feel like you have to try and find another approach, and also maybe a more accessible approach to sort of convey that richness to the player. That's basically it. I was just, I don't know if I'm run or overrun. But yeah, how to, I don't know, it's more of like a provocation. I want to see more like sense of wonder in the games, and games that sense of kind of delving into that sense of the sublime and feeling that you're kind of being hit in the chest, where you see some kind of amazing construction of the game, and like some realization about how something works. And again, the tying into Nicholas' thing of if you tell people exactly like where the world, where the game world, like you say, you discovered like 90 out of 100 secrets, and all these things are kind of counter to that, and that they're strictly delineating the world rather than letting the player feel like it's something that stretches off into this kind of haze of where the game, like finally, obviously games aren't infinite, but you can give that impression by not specifying their boundaries. But yeah.